Sometimes I think when we're trying to solve things, you are under pressure and you're trying to do those things that you don't think about, you don't see the whole picture, if that makes sense. I think when you're more calm and not in a stress environment, and when you are thinking, just more out loud without having the stressor, you're able to be to get the answers that you need.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're joined by Yesenia Avellaneda, a senior project engineer in global operations at Abbott. Yesenia brings a powerful blend of biomedical engineering expertise and real-world manufacturing leadership, having led multi-million-dollar capital projects, scaled production lines, and built new manufacturing operations from the ground up. She's also a passionate advocate for diversity in STEM, currently serving as Regional Vice President for the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers Region 6, where she's helping shape the next generation of engineering leaders. Yesenia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me. I'm super excited to talk a lot more about my life and also share some knowledge that I have.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to start with a few rapid fire questions I'll ask you. And don't think too much about the answers. Just say whatever comes to mind. Ready?
Sounds good.
Okay. First question. Open source tools or proprietary software?
Open source.
Is best practice helpful or limiting?
It's helpful.
All right. And last one. If you had to explain your job to a 10-year-old, what would you say?
Communication.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you for going through that with me. Now we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode. First question, what made you decide to become an engineer?
Yeah, that is a really good question. My pathway was a little different. I don't know. I guess it was not the regular pathway in terms of I was initially a pre-med student, biology, human physiology degree at the University of Oregon. And engineering was not something I thought about. I'll be honest. I think my dad and I, we had a plan that I was going to be a doctor, and that's all I thought about since I can remember. However, it was my end of senior year at the University of Oregon. I told my dad that I did not want to be a doctor. I wanted to explore different career pathways because I always been super multifaceted. So I like doing so many things. It's not just engineering or just, one specific career. I'm involved in so many things. So as I was thinking about like different careers, I remember going to a medical trip in Nicaragua. And in that medical trip specific, I worked with prosthetic surgeons and also orthopedics, and also a team of biomedical engineers. And I remember how the combination of engineering and medicine was there, right? Because I had prior knowledge on medicine or the human face and biology background. For me, I think that moment when I realized that there is much more to engineering. Sometimes you think engineering is just, maybe the automotive or the aerospace industry, right? You are bucketed into specific ones. You don't think of many other career pathways that you can take. So that's when I realized, I wanted to be an engineer. And like I said, it was something that I found out later on through different trips that I took and also through thinking, right? How do I visualize my life? And I think it was the combination of engineering and medicine. And that's what biomedical engineering is.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did that conversation go with your father when he said, actually, I don't think I want to do this path that we've been planning forever. I'm interested in
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah, no, it wasn't pretty for sure. I have always been very how can I put it? I always did what my dad told me. If that makes sense. I never broke any rules, or I never did anything to disappoint my dad or mom or my family in a specific. I think that was the first disappointment because my dad is an engineer. My brother is an engineer. Most of my uncles are
Mm,
engineers. So I come from a background where you know, my parents went to school and they were educated. So education was really important. In addition to that, I always, we always had a plan, but I never really thought about until I was like 20 something, right? That I did not want that. So it wasn't easy for him to understand. To be honest, sometimes when I go back home, he still, mentions, that it's not too late. I'm not old. Well, she's like, you're still young. You could still, go to medical school because I did everything, right? All my pre-med requirements, all of the classes. I think the only thing I needed to do is the MCAT and apply to medical school. So not an easy thing, but I think he understands it, right? At the end, a parent wants their kid to be happy. And I think he wants that for me. But at the same time, every parent has expectations and his expectations were just higher, and it is what it is. But
yeah.
I am babying my pathway within my field, and I'm trying to continue achieving things. Right? Maybe it's not medicine, but it's engineering now.
I heard a quote just a few days ago that I thought was so profound. And here's the quote. It's the secret to happiness is freedom. The secret to freedom, courage. And it sounds to me like you had to have a fair amount of courage to approach your father, your family, and say, actually, I've decided to do something different. And I hope that's led to some freedom and a lot of happiness for you.
It has. And to be honest, it wasn't something like being an engineer, it wasn't something that I knew right away. I'll be honest. It was 2 years of 2 gap years where I was working in public health, where I was doing so many other things. I became a news reporter, like a sports reporter for like the Timbers, which is like a MLS club in Oregon for soccer. I did so many other things. I did pageants in that year. I decided to travel to many countries. Like I'm telling you, I was very not confused, but I think I was finding my path. And it was a 2 year. It took me 2 years to actually be like, hey, this is what I want to do next. So yeah, a lot of courage and also a
Yeah,
lot of being okay with not being okay, if that makes sense, with the
it
uncertainty.
does
And I
make
think,
sense. Yeah.
hmm
I think it's great that you took all this time to really understand yourself and what was going to be most fulfilling for you, because I think a lot of us fall into that trap of there's a plan set for us. Maybe there's a lot of intention behind it. Maybe there's not a lot of intention behind it, but we kind of just go through the motion and become whatever that plan is without thinking deeply about what is it that's going to make us happy and fulfilled. So I love the fact that you took some time, several years to really understand yourself and what was going to be best for you. I imagine that your medical background, the physiology and the medicine classes that you took probably contributed to your path through biomedical engineering. How did the medical background impact your education through biomedical engineering?
yeah, no, 100%. So the foundations of biomedical engineering it's combined within like the background of human physiology, biology, and having an understanding in that field. It was super easy to be able to relate the concepts to biomedical engineering because, like, for example, currently I work within diabetes care, right, which is a disease within the pancreatic system. So that's something that it gave me so much benefit in school and also working right now, right? Because I understand not just the engineering part, but just the human physiology of how the device connects to the body and how it's affecting, right? The human body and why it's necessary or beneficial to a patient or to a person. And yeah, having that background was so necessary. And I think that's why I also chose biomedical engineering, right? Because I had that background, and I also I have a respect for medicine and a love for medicine, but I wanted to, combine it and do something else with my life.
Terrific. Terrific. Would you be able to share a little of what your day-to-day work looks like? So you're working at Abbott. You mentioned you're working on diabetes devices. To the extent that you can share,
Yeah.
what does a day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now I work with NPIs, which is new product introduction, right? What does that mean? It means that within our diabetes unit right here at Abbott, we are introducing new products, right? New innovations into the field. So my job as global operations is making sure that the sign transfer phase is ready, for us to be able to launch this device, right? So it's a big team, like working from iteration of the device up to FDA approval. So I work through the whole phase, right, with the team. But my job is to make sure that the operation team is ready to and is prepared to be able to produce the device, right? And for that to happen, there is a lot of pieces that we have to do. So day to day, it's a lot of meetings. I'll be honest, a lot of meetings with different teams, a lot of presentations and PowerPoints as a project engineer for sure. But I think the biggest thing is just being able to understand what the deliverables are and being able to present that to leadership, right? In addition to that, I get to travel a lot because the sites that I'm working with, they're in Europe, right? In England and Ireland. So I get to go there a lot just to be able to see how everything is progressing. But like for example, today it was just a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations, and a lot of talking to the teams within the sites and within the different key stakeholders that make this NPI. So yeah, I think to describe it like as a PM, you're managing people, you're managing projects, you're doing a lot of presentations and PowerPoints, to be honest. But there is a lot more in it than that, for sure.
You mentioned how important it is to understand what the core deliverables are and to keep those core deliverables in the forefront of your mind. It can be easy to get distracted, right? Go down rabbit holes and spend time and money on this and that. Are there any tools or strategies that you use and have found helpful for A, really being clear on what the deliverables are, and then B, remembering them in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, no, I think as a PM, there is so many tools that you can use, but the tools that I've used are so we use Smart Sheets, which is a tool for timelines, right? To be able to put all of the key deliverables and milestones that you have to achieve in there. In addition to that, to be able to translate, that project charter or that timeline into something more visual, I use Office Timeline Pro. It's another tool from PowerPoint, actually. It's an add on to PowerPoint. And that gives you like the visuals, right, that you want to present. For me to remember, I think a lot of the things that I like to do, at least for like my key milestones, I have like a high level overview of what I'm trying to achieve with the dates, right, that needs to be done. And I do have it in my calendar. If there's a specific dates like a US launch or US launch or specific dates that we have to achieve, that there are high level milestones that, if we don't make it, it's gonna be a delay to the project. I make sure that those are in my calendar for sure. And then in addition to that, in every single meeting that I have, like a project meeting that I have, the first thing that you're gonna see in there is, your key milestones that you're trying to achieve. And for us to do that, that's the first thing that I usually go refer to, right? So this is where we are and this is what we're trying to achieve. So everyone understands every time we have a meeting that we have milestones to hit, right? I think that always sets the tone, right? On what we're trying to deliver as a team.
Microsoft Timelines Pro, that's a new one. I haven't heard about that. I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
check that
it's
out. That sounds like
Office
a really
Timeline
useful
Pro.
tool.
Yeah. No, 100%. Office
Office
Timeline
Timeline
Pro
Pro.
from PowerPoint. It's like a PowerPoint add-on. It's really nice. I truly like it because it gives you like a very nice visual overview, and it's easy to put, like timelines together and things like that. Um, Leadership likes it. They do enjoy having, more of like a nice visual, a very clean visual, right? Because sometimes if you go into like Smart Sheets or Excel projects, or is it called? I think it's Excel. I don't know what it's called. I don't use it, but like it's a lot more wordy than visual or appealing.
Mm, yeah. Clean visuals are so helpful in any
Yeah,
presentation,
100%.
definitely.
100%.
All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about manufacturing operations. And you've been involved with this deeply. You've helped bring up new manufacturing operations from concept through full production. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in that area? And then one thing I'd love to hear is, what are some of the biggest challenges that come with scaling up new manufacturing like this, and how have you and your team been able to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So before ADC, before being a project engineer, I worked a lot with as a manufacturing engineer and also as a technical production supervisor for Abbott, but a different business unit, which is CRM. That's cardiac rhythm management, mainly working with pacemakers, which is more, in the heart, and also working with catheters, which is like the delivery system for the pacemakers, right? So, so working with that, I think when I joined, that was 2022, and at that specific time, we were, it was just like in development, one of them, and one of them was launched. So the one in development, I think we were doing maybe at the beginning of development like 20 units a month, right? Once we launched and got FDA approved, we started making, I think, 30 to 40 units a month because like these devices, they're very long, like the catheters, and it takes up to 3 days to make one. It goes through so many processes, right? It's not like a high, I guess, it's more of like a lengthy process and smaller builds. But anyway, so we scaled up from doing maybe the goal a month was like 800 units to being able to do 5,000 units a month, right? And to scale that up, that took
Wow.
up to a year and a half. So it doesn't come, it's not something that you go from like, you know what I mean? From day one to like 6 months. I think it depends, right? A lot of things have to change when you're scaling up. You are doing hiring, adding more operators and technicians. You're also increasing the capacity, right? Increasing the equipment, increasing the volumes, increasing the demands, and there are so many changes that goes into all of that. I think the biggest risks or issues when scaling up is that sometimes you can think I have to go fast, but I think it's a balance, right? Of being able to, of course, to you wanna meet the demands, but also you wanna make sure you do it well. And to do it well, I think you have to have a structured plan, and you have to understand very well, like capacity, not just for the manufacturing lines, but also capacity for headcount, right? Once you understand what your capacity is and what you're able to attain, you can, do a line balance, you can do a Kaizen, you can do a lot of OPEX initiatives to be able to come up with a plan, right? And then that's how you kind of do phase approach. We went through a phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four to be able to scale up. It was not an easy thing to do, but I think there is always a lot of things that you learn throughout the way, right? We learn that that I guess we thought initially we had assumptions, right? That we thought it was going to work this specific way, but along the way we learned that those assumptions were wrong. So we had to have a plan B to to be able to continue meeting those deadlines that we had in terms of demands and production.
you think of a time when something didn't go according to plan? Maybe it was as you were scaling up manufacturing, maybe it was a different project altogether, but in as much detail as you're able to share, was there a time in your career where it just didn't go according to plan? And then, like, how did you and your team react to and overcome that problem?
Yeah, no, that is. I'm thinking, right? There is so many times that things do not go to plan, right? Even with smaller projects. Um, I remember this is another project that I led in CRM. It was setting up a new receiving and inspection line. That's where we inspect the components, right, that are coming from different vendors, and we had to set up a line, like a whole receiving like lab from scratch. And some of the validation work that we were doing, the software validation work, was not going to plan. We were failing validation a couple of times, so we also, we brought engineers from Silmar, California, because at this time I was in Minneapolis, and yeah, I think it was like failure after failure, and I sometimes the morale of your team, could go down, and sometimes when you're not being able to achieve, right? Um, it does play this, like I said, this morale, or this feeling of like, what can we do? How do we approach this? I think one thing that we did, it was taking a break from it, being able to like not work on this, because I think we were working hours and hours and it was not going the way. I think the approach was like, how can we just get together and not think about this? Maybe go out, and eat something or whatever, or go on a walk and things like that. And then we came back and started doing like more of a listening session, from everyone. I think understanding the inputs from every single team member and being able to like troubleshoot to different methods, right? I think at that time we did a fishbone, a 5Y, to be able to understand what was going on, and also leveraging, other team members that might not have been there to understand their input, right? And that's how we were able to overcome. But sometimes I think we don't, when we're trying to solve things, you are under pressure and you're trying to do those things, and you don't think about, you don't see the whole picture, if that makes sense. I think when you're more calm and not in a stress environment, and when you are thinking, just more out loud without having the stressor, you're able to be to get the answers that you need.
And it's not terribly uncommon, right? That when you're going from prototype builds to production builds, there are problems. You fail validation, whatever it is. A lot of people, especially who aren't engineers or aren't very familiar with manufacturing, they just assume, well, you design a product and then you make it, and it's that simple, right? But there's a big handoff that occurs between product development engineers and the manufacturing team. Have there been any tools that you found particularly helpful to make that transition as smooth as possible?
I'm thinking for failure analysis in a specific, you mean, or more of managing this?
Could be either one. I'll leave it up to you. But
Yeah.
the engineering team who designs a product, right? They're not necessarily manufacturing people, and so they might not be thinking about all the little tweaks that need to occur and what the manufacturing team is going to have to do to actually produce that design in a production environment. And so, like, uh, how have your teams been able to make that handoff between engineering and manufacturing? Have there been, like, is there a particular process or protocol that you follow? Is there a tool that you use? Does it just
Yeah.
come down to lots of conversations between the two teams?
Yeah, I mean, everything is in the design transfer, report, right? You have the protocol, you have the report, and you have your design transfer plan, right? Everything that we're that I guess the R&D team or the design team is, working on has to be identified in your DTP, and also your DND, which is your design transfer plan, your design deliverables, right? And once you have all of that, implemented in there, that's how you transfer to production, right? Once you have your plan, do your report, and then you can do your, so you have your plan. The plan states what you're gonna do, and then you do your validation runs, right? Everything, your PQs, OQs, TMBs. So once you do that, you have to close your report, and once you close your report, that means that you're ready to be able to get the approval from FDA, right? And everything is documented. I think the best. I mean, it's been working with the team is making sure we document everything and making sure we document what we're trying to do, right? And that's just a process that we follow. In addition to that, I mean, there is a lot of meetings like with R&D and the design team on different mitigations, and also understanding the risks that we have, right? To be able to, to control all of those. So overall, I would say tools specific. I think it's a lot of we use OneNote a lot. I don't know if this to document all the meeting notes and all of the deliverables too. Besides like the other tools that I mentioned before. But in terms of process, it's more of like your design transfer process. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. If you're able to, are there any specific items? I'm sure there are loads of them, right? Dozens or hundreds. But what are a couple examples of specific items that are in that design transfer plan, just for those who maybe aren't as familiar with this area?
Yeah, I mean, your design transfer plan, I mean, it's just deliverables that you have to attain, right? You have roles and responsibilities, you have your equipment, the list of equipment, you list all your procedures, you list all your sub-assemblies. You're going to list everything that you're going to do, right, for the specific component. Right? Say you have a device that is, square shape or whatever device that you have to make sure you put in there, like the components, the equipment, whatever you're going to use to be able to do the validation, right? And then in that plan, you have to state, all of the validation activities that are going to happen, right? Your TMBs, your PQs, your OQs, and everything. And then you also have like an assessment from regulatory, an assessment from quality. It's a lot of like everything that you worked goes in there, if that makes sense. So I think those are a few things that
Yeah.
I'm able to share.
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you for sharing those details. I see it from the other side, right? My company, we make custom manufacturing equipment that teams like yours use, fixtures and automation machines and things like that. And we don't fully appreciate the entirety of this design transfer plan, right? That like your teams are looking at, but from our side, we just see, all right, here's the new machine, here's the robot, here's the fixture that you're going to use. So it's interesting to hear someone from your perspective talk about the entirety of this enormous plan and all the detail and the work that goes into that. Yesenia, thank you so much for being with us today. This is super fun. Thank you for sharing all these wonderful pieces of knowledge about manufacturing and design transfer. Thank you, Yesenia. I really appreciate it. I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.